In schools, when we talk about writing, we really need to talk about two different aspects of writing. One is writing to learn, and the other is learning to write. Writing to learn is helping kids use writing in order to document their thinking, to make meaning out of things. It's why we make a list before we go to the market. It helps us to organize our thoughts and gives us a place to store that thinking. We can do that with students in the classroom. A number of other sessions that you'll have access to will help you know how to do that with graphic organizers and foldables and those kinds of things. Informal assessment is also often done with writing to learn. We want kids to write in order to be able to learn. Another aspect of writing is learning to write, and we'll spend more time on that. Learning to write is when we want to teach kids to be really good writers, because what that does is it gives them access to opportunities beyond just our classrooms. When they look to go to the university to study engineering or economics, they're going to need to be able to write well. That's their ticket in the door for many things. When they start to apply for jobs, they need to be able to communicate effectively through writing. And so teaching them to write well so that they can clearly communicate those organized, well-developed thoughts is critical in the classroom setting. When we look to help kids write well, so they're learning to be writers, they're learning to write well, there are some processes that we can take them through that will help them in order to be able to do that in a way that's consistent. And we're going to look today at process writing because that's one that's highly effective with teaching students to write well. It begins with the pre-writing phase, when we help kids gather the needed information and organize that so that they can best communicate that in a really effective way. Then we'll move on to draft, because you have to just get it down on the paper before we know what to do with it. Then we'll talk a little bit about helping students revise. This is about content and clarity. Did they say things that they needed to say? Did they say it well and in a way that other people will be able to understand it? Then we'll look at editing. That's the part that sometimes distinguishes those who are really excellent writers and that give that sense of having a good education from those that are a little less so. And then there's the opportunity to share that writing with other people. When our writing has purpose, we tend to do a much better job with it. So let's start with pre-writing. In order for students to be able to articulate really good information in their writing, we have to help them gather that information. I was working with a student one time who had some really brilliant ideas. But when I read the paper, one brilliant idea was here, and it should have connected to this one that was later in the paper, but it was much later in the paper. And so we had to think about how are we going to get these really strong ideas in a way that other people could read that paper and know that he had some really strong ideas. So one of the things, once we've gathered all of this good information, is helping kids figure out how to organize that information in a way that's going to most clearly and effectively communicate that. One of the ways that we can do that is teaching kids traditional outlining techniques. Another way that we can do that is through the use of graphic organizers, where they choose chunks of information that they know they need, and then they put the details somewhere related to that so they know that that whole section needs to go together. Another way that works really well for many students is to write all those ideas down on individual little pieces of paper or note cards, and then to manipulate and organize those so that I got these together, and these really do go together to make that thought complete. These go together, and then they can put them all together, stack them up, and they have their things ready to write into a paper. Helping them learn how to take good information and then organize that information effectively is going to lead to a much stronger writing piece from the beginning. Once they have that part down, one of the things that we as teachers need to do, and it's one of the hardest things that we as teachers do, is to sort of be quiet and let them just write. As teachers, we often think our job is to tell. We need to tell, whatever it is they need to know. But when it comes to writing, sometimes we just need to be quiet and let them write. The drafting stage, just let them get their ideas down on paper. From the littlest ones who are only writing 1 or 2 sentences to those that are getting ready to go to college and writing research papers. They just need time to write. And so, teachers, this is a time for us to be quiet and just let them write. By all means, help if they get stuck, but we need to just let them write. Once they have some ideas down on paper, then we can really dig in and start to help them refine these processes of writing. We want to look at revision, and this is where we take those ideas that they've put down on paper, we've taken those few sentences or those many pages of writing, and we ask questions like, did I develop that idea completely? Do I need to add more details for my reader to be able to create a picture? Did I say that in a way that easily moved my reader from one concept to the next concept to the next concept? As we guide students through that, we need to do that very strategically and do it in a highly focused way. We can't just say, well, there's something wrong with this, fix it. We need to say, as I read that, I did not understand how the first idea that you had led you to the second idea, so that they can create a transition. It needs to be very strategic so that students learn exactly the skills that make for good writing. Revision is all about content and clarity. Does it have enough content? Does it have accurate content? Does it have content that needs to be removed because it doesn't really relate? And then is it clear? Did I say this in a way that my reader knows exactly what I was trying to say? Often the writer's very clear in their own mind, but we need to make sure that the reader can be absolutely clear about what was in the writer's mind. Once we have that in place, then we can move on to those details. This is where we look at the rules of grammar. These are the things that distinguish that person who is very well educated from that person who may be a little less educated. When students are able to write with the conventions of language, then people think, I need to pay attention to this. It may be that the ideas were already really strong, but sometimes those little details of grammar get in the reader's way of knowing that this person had real value in what they had to say. Again, just like in revision, this needs to be very strategic. We can't just say, follow the rules of grammar. We need to teach the rules of grammar and then have students apply those. When we teach grammar, often we teach grammar and then we teach writing. When we're teaching editing, we want to teach grammar as we teach writing. So if I'm teaching students to use capital letters, or if I'm teaching students to use commas, or I'm teaching students about other forms of punctuation or subject-verb agreement, I need to make sure that they're using those in their writing at the time. I don't want to overwhelm them with things that they don't know yet. I want to make sure that students have this grammar information and that they're able to then apply it in their writing. Now that's also true of their speaking. We want to make sure that students are speaking well, but this particular focus is on writing. When we teach these rules that are related to how we use language, we want to make sure that we're directly and immediately applying that into writing. Because now we have clear concepts that are well developed and well organized, and we don't have details of grammar that get in the way of the reader understanding what we wanted to say as writers. Those things go together. Then we want to give kids an opportunity to share that writing. Often as the teacher, we're the only audience a student has for writing. And sometimes that's enough. But how wonderful if students have an opportunity to learn from one another. If they have a chance to be the reader of one of their classmates' writing. That way they become not only more skilled at revision and editing by helping their classmates, but they also become better readers in the process of becoming better writers. And if I know somebody else is going to read what I've written, I'm a little more careful. I want to make sure that it was really good, so it's something I can be proud of. So give your students a chance to share with the other students in the classroom, with family members at home, with neighbors, so that they have a chance to share this hard work of writing. Now, let's go back a little bit to writing to learn. When we are thinking about writing to learn, we don't take it through that formal process of writing. When we're doing writing to learn, though, when we're having students write and we're having students get their ideas down on paper. And so it's contributing eventually to becoming good writers. But there are other reasons that many of us write. We don't write a formal research paper in order to go to the market for the week. We don't write a formal research paper when we are mailing a letter to a friend that we knew when we were children. So we need to talk about the different types of writing and realize that some writing is designed really more for us than for other people. As we're teaching in science, as we're teaching in history, as we're teaching in economics or government, even mathematics, having students write to document their thinking, to ask themselves questions, needs to take place throughout the course of whatever subject we're teaching. It gives us information as teachers, but it also helps students to solidify their thinking. If I've gone over some information in relation to science, and I really want to know if students remember that, then I can ask them to write something about it. List the things that they learned that day that they thought were important. That gives me two possibilities. I can look at, did they take in some of the information? But then if I ask them to identify important things, I know if they were able to identify as important the things that I tried to emphasize in my lesson as important. If they don't match up, then I need to go back and do some things. It also allows students to process their own learning, because as they write things down, often they come up with, oh, I thought I knew that, but I didn't. I'm not able to write it down. And so when we do those writing to learn strategies, those writing to learn activities in our classroom, we're not just creating writers, we're creating thinkers. And that is always the ultimate goal of both reading and writing, is that we're creating thinkers in the classroom. Teaching kids writing as a tool for communication and for thinking are the two most critical aspects of what we will do in relation to teaching writing. Kids need to write. They need to write every day. They need to write very frequently. They need to write both informally and formally as often as possible, because being able to think well and communicate well is the key to an open door to their futures.